The tension inside the Washington studio that evening could have been sliced with a knife. The cameras were live, the lights bright enough to sting the eyes, and across from the anchor sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the firebrand Democrat from Texas known for her sharp tongue and unapologetic defense of her values. Millions were tuned in, waiting for a segment billed as a serious discussion on democracy, accountability, and the rule of law. But nobody watching could have predicted what was about to unfold. The network had invited Judge Tanya Chutkan, a respected federal judge overseeing some of the most high-profile cases in recent memory. She wasn't accustomed to appearing on television. In fact, she was known for avoiding the limelight entirely, preferring her courtroom over cable news sets. But in a rare exception, she agreed to appear alongside Crockett to discuss the nation's growing divisions and the accountability of political leaders. From the moment the program began, sparks flew. The anchor posed the first question. Judge Chutkan, Congresswoman Crockett, tonight the nation is looking at the intersection of law and politics. What is the responsibility of public servants in maintaining trust in our democratic system? Chutkan's answer was direct, clipped, and judicial in tone. Our responsibility is to uphold the law without fear or favor. The courtroom cannot be swayed by political noise, nor can it bow to public opinion. Crockett, sitting tall in her signature bold-colored suit, smiled. And my responsibility, as a representative of the people, is to speak truth to power. The law may be blind, but the people aren't. They see hypocrisy, they see injustice, and they expect me to call it out. The audience, both in the studio and online, leaned forward. What began as a discussion soon shifted into a clash of styles, Chutkan's measured restraint against Crockett's fiery candor. Crockett criticized the system for being slow to hold the powerful accountable, while Chutkan reminded her that justice demanded patience and process. Then it happened. Half an hour into the broadcast, after a particularly heated exchange about the treatment of marginalized communities in the justice system, Chutkan turned directly toward Crockett. Her voice, calm but edged with authority, carried through every microphone. Congresswoman Crockett, she said firmly, this is not your courtroom, and this is not your committee floor. I would caution you to remember that this is a serious discussion, not an opportunity for grandstanding. The studio fell silent. The anchor blinked, unsure whether to intervene. The audience gasped audibly. Social media erupted instantly, with the words Judge Tanya Chutkan warns Jasmine Crockett blazing across timelines before the sentence had even fully registered in people's minds. Crockett, however, didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on the judge. Her hands, neatly folded in her lap, didn't move. For a long moment, she said nothing, allowing the silence itself to become part of her response. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, and impossibly calm. With all due respect, Judge Chutkan, Crockett said, I don't need a courtroom to speak truth, and I don't need a committee room to defend the people I represent. My voice belongs to them. And if my passion for justice looks like grandstanding, then perhaps the real question is why passion is absent where it's most needed. The room seemed to exhale all at once. Chutkan's brows lifted slightly, betraying the first crack in her stoic demeanor. The anchor tried to pivot to another topic, but the moment had already taken on a life of its own. Every camera angle caught Crockett's composed face, her deliberate cadence, the unshakable certainty in her tone. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. On Twitter, hashtags like #CrockettCalm, #JudgeV's Congresswoman, and #TruthToPower began trending. TikTok edits of Crockett's response racked up millions of views before the broadcast had even ended. Commentators praised her poise, contrasting it with the judge's attempt to assert control. Even those who weren't fans of Crockett admitted her response had the precision of a scalpel, sharp, clean, and unforgettable. But inside the studio, the story wasn't over. The anchor, sensing an opportunity, leaned into the tension. Congresswoman, Judge Chutkan, clearly there's disagreement here. Do you believe, Congresswoman, that the judiciary is failing the people you represent? Crockett inhaled slowly. She could have lashed out, could have ridden the viral wave she sensed was already forming. But instead, she chose restraint. I don't believe in painting with a broad brush, she said. There are good judges, and Judge Chutkan is one of them. But I also believe we can't hide behind the robes and pretend the system doesn't fail people every single day. If I sound impatient, it's because my constituents don't have the luxury of waiting. That single word, luxury, seemed to hang in the air. Chutkan nodded, her expression softening, just slightly. For the first time that night, there was no clash, just acknowledgement. And that, too, went viral. After the show ended, both women walked backstage. The cameras were off, but staffers and producers buzzed around them, whispering about the clip already exploding online. Chutkan approached Crockett, her heels clicking against the studio floor. "You're relentless," she said quietly. "And you're unshakable," Crockett replied with a small smile. "Guess that makes us even." They shook hands, the moment surprisingly cordial considering what had just unfolded. But outside that studio, the story had already taken on mythic proportions. Cable networks replayed the clip on loop. Commentators debated endlessly. Was Chutkan right to issue the warning, or did Crockett's calm response prove her point? Pundits across the spectrum weighed in. Supporters of Crockett called her a master of composure, while critics accused her of disrespect. Yet even her critics admitted she hadn't raised her voice, hadn't lost her cool, she had simply stood her ground. By the next morning, Crockett's office was flooded with calls and emails. Constituents cheered her for representing them with dignity and fire. College students shared the clip in civics classes, pointing to it as an example of rhetoric under pressure. Editorial boards wrote columns about the night Jasmine Crockett's calm went viral. Meanwhile, Chutkan herself was asked about the exchange when she returned to court later that week. Reporters shouted questions as she entered the building. She didn't answer, of course, judges rarely do, but one reporter swore they saw the faintest trace of a smile cross her face before she disappeared into the courthouse. For Crockett, the moment became a turning point. She was no stranger to viral clips. Her quick wit in congressional hearings had earned her millions of views before, but this was different. This wasn't about a fiery takedown or a dramatic soundbite. It was about composure under pressure, about turning what could have been a scolding into a statement of purpose. Her campaign team quickly realized the impact. They leaned into the narrative, crafting a message around calm strength, resilience, and the power of dignity. At town halls, Crockett recounted the moment, not as a victory over Chutkan, but as a lesson in staying grounded. Sometimes the best way to be heard, she told a crowd in Dallas, is not to shout louder, but to stay calm when the world expects you to explode. Calm is contagious. And calm can be powerful. The audience erupted into applause. Political analysts later noted that Crockett's viral moment had reshaped her public image. No longer seen solely as the fiery congresswoman who sparred in committee hearings, she was now also seen as the composed leader who could withstand pressure and still deliver truth. It gave her a broader appeal, reaching people who might have dismissed her before. As for Judge Chutkan, the moment only added to her reputation as a no-nonsense figure unafraid to challenge even the boldest voices. In some circles, she was hailed as the judge who stood her ground. In others, she was criticized for trying to silence passion. Either way, her name was now known far beyond the legal community. But perhaps the most fascinating part of the story wasn't what happened on air, or even in the days that followed. It was what lingered. Clips fade, trends pass, and social media moves on. Yet months later, when new debates erupted about democracy, accountability, and the balance between law and politics, people returned to that night. They quoted Crockett's calm words. They replayed the exchange. They remembered how, in a moment of potential chaos, a single calm response had shifted the narrative entirely. In the end, it wasn't about a judge warning a congresswoman or a congresswoman standing her ground. It was about the power of restraint. The power of composure. The power of knowing that sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest one, it's the calmest one. And so, the story of Judge Tanya Chutkan warning Jasmine Crockett on live TV, and Jasmine's calm response going viral became more than just a clip. It became a symbol, a reminder etched into the memory of millions, that calm, when wielded with purpose, can echo louder than any shout.